You type 6 words and hit send. Before the machine does anything you would call thinking, those 6 words have stopped being words at all. They are tens of thousands of numbers. This is what happens in between. Last time we looked at why these systems make things up. The short version was that they predict rather than look anything up. That answer raises an obvious next question, and it is the one I want to spend this video on. If it is predicting, how exactly? What is the machinery? I want to walk the whole path, from the moment you press the key to the moment words start appearing on your screen. It is not a long path. There are about 5 stages, and none of them are mysterious on their own. That is the part worth knowing going in. There is no step in here where something clever happens that nobody can explain. Every stage is mechanical and, taken alone, fairly boring. What is surprising is what falls out of the chain when you run it at scale. So, you have hit send. First thing that happens to your sentence is that it gets broken into pieces. Not into words. This is the first place people's intuition goes wrong. The pieces are called tokens, and they are chunks of text that the system decided were useful during training. Common words usually survive intact. Rarer ones get split. A word like unhappiness might come apart into un, happy, and ness. Your name, if it is not a common one, might become 3 or 4 fragments. There is nothing linguistic about where those cuts land. Nobody sat down and decided that un is a meaningful prefix. The vocabulary was built by a statistical procedure that looked at an enormous pile of text and found which chunks were worth having as single units, because they turned up often enough to earn a slot. Which means the machine's idea of a word and yours are different, and they were never meant to match. This has consequences you have probably run into without knowing why. Ask a model how many letters are in a word and it can get it wrong, which feels absurd for something that writes fluent prose. But it is not looking at letters. It is looking at chunks. Asking it to count characters is like asking someone to count the bricks in a wall they have only ever seen as a photograph of a house. Same reason arithmetic on long numbers goes badly. The number gets chopped into pieces that have nothing to do with place value, and then the system has to reason about quantity using fragments that cut across the digits. Write your sentence is now a list of tokens. Second stage. Each token gets turned into a list of numbers. Just a long row of them, a few thousand values, all sitting between roughly -1 and 1. This is where meaning starts to live, and it is worth being careful about what that sentence actually claims. The row of numbers for a token is called an embedding, and it comes out of training. Tokens that show up in similar contexts end up with similar rows, not because anyone defined them, but because a token that keeps appearing where another token appears gets pushed toward the same region by the training process. The usual demonstration is that you can do arithmetic on these rows. Take the row for king, subtract man, add woman, and you land near queen. That result is real and it is genuinely strange, and it is also the point where a lot of explanations overclaim. What it shows is that the training has arranged these rows so that certain relationships come out as consistent directions in the space. There is a direction that roughly corresponds to gender, another that roughly corresponds to plural, another to tense. Those directions are not labeled and nobody put them there deliberately. They are the shape that falls out of predicting text well. So the numbers do carry structure. They do not carry understanding. Nothing in that row knows what a queen is. What it has is a position, and that position is useful because of where everything else sits relative to it. Now your sentence is a grid. One row of numbers per token stacked in order. Third stage, and this is the one everything else hangs on. The tokens start looking at each other. Take a plain sentence. The trophy did not fit in the suitcase because it was too small. What is it? Every English speaker resolves that instantly, and to do it, you have to hold trophy and suitcase and small together at once and work out which pairing makes sense. The mechanism that does this is called attention, and the name is unusually honest for a technical term. Each token gets to look across every other token in your input and decide how much weight to give each one. Concretely, every token puts out a request for the kind of information it needs and an advertisement for the kind it can offer. Those get compared against each other, all pairs at once. Where a request and an advertisement line up well, information flows. Where they do not, almost nothing flows. So the row of numbers for it gets updated, pulling in a large share from suitcase, a smaller share from trophy, and small amounts from the rest. It is no longer a generic it. It is an it that has been colored by its surroundings. That comparison happens for every pair of tokens simultaneously, not left to right, all at once, in parallel. This is the single change that made these systems possible, and it is why they arrived when they did rather than a decade earlier. It maps beautifully onto graphics hardware, which is very good at doing the same operation on thousands of things at the same time. And it runs many times over in parallel with different priorities. One pass may be tracking which noun a pronoun refers to. Another, which verb goes with which subject. Another, something we do not have a clean name for. These get read off after the fact by researchers poking at the model, not specified in advance. Fourth stage, you do all of that again, then again, dozens of times. Each round is a layer, and the pattern inside each is the same. The tokens look at each other and update. Then each token gets processed on its own for a moment. Then the next layer takes over. What changes is the altitude. Early layers deal in something close to grammar, the shape of the sentence, which word attaches to which. Middle layers handle relationships and roles, who did what to whom. Late layers deal in whatever the model needs to actually produce the next piece of text. Nobody assigned those jobs. There is no line in the code that says layer 4 handles syntax. That division of labor emerged because it turned out to be a useful way to organize the work of predicting text, and the training process rewards whatever is useful. After the last layer, you are left with one row of numbers that carries everything the system has made of your input. Fifth stage, and this is where output appears. That final row gets turned into a score for every single token in the vocabulary. All of them. 50,000 or more, everyone getting a number for how well it would fit as the next piece of text. Those scores become probabilities, and then the system picks one. Which is the moment worth slowing down for, because it explains the thing that confuses people most. It picks one token, not a sentence, not a thought, one chunk of text, often just part of a word. Then that token gets added to the end of your input, and the entire process runs again from the top. All the layers, all the attention, everything, for the next token, and again for the one after that. The paragraph you read on your screen was never planned. It was assembled, one piece at a time, each piece chosen with no guarantee about where the sentence would end up. That is why it streams in front of you rather than appearing at once. You are not watching a rendering effect. You are watching the actual pace of the thing being built. Now, how does it pick, given those probabilities? This is the setting called temperature, and it is the one people fiddle with most while understanding least. Set it to 0, and the system always takes the highest scoring token. Same input, same output every time. Set it higher and it samples from the distribution instead, so tokens that scored second or third get a real chance. That is the whole of it. Temperature does not make the model more creative, imaginative, or bold, whatever the interface tells you. It makes it less likely to take the top pick. Sometimes the effect of that reads as creative. Sometimes it reads as the model wandering off a cliff, because a lower-ranked token led somewhere the higher-ranked one would not have gone, and every token after it was chosen on the basis of that turn. It also explains why the same question gives you different answers on different days. Nothing changed inside the model. A different die came up. So that is the path. Break into chunks, Turn chunks into numbers, let the numbers look at each other, repeat a few dozen times, score every possible next chunk, roll, repeat. Now the question this was all building toward: where in that chain does understanding happen? Walk it back. Tokenization is a lookup table. Embeddings are rows of numbers fixed at training time. Attention is comparing rows against each other and taking a weighted blend. Layers are that same operation stacked. The final step is a score and a sample. There is no stage where a proposition gets checked against the world. Nowhere that a belief is formed or held. No place where the system consults what it knows about suitcases in order to work out what it refers to. It resolved that pronoun because the arrangement of numbers made the suitcase reading come out heavier. And that arrangement exists because it worked across a great deal of text where similar sentences appeared. And here is what makes this genuinely difficult rather than just deflating. That is not nothing. A system with no beliefs about suitcases still resolves the pronoun correctly, more reliably than some people do. The performance is real. Only the explanation we reach for is wrong. Which leaves us somewhere uncomfortable, and I would rather sit in it than pretend otherwise. We have built something that does many of the things we thought required understanding, without the thing we thought was required. Either understanding is less than we assumed, or these systems are doing something we do not have a good word for yet. Both possibilities are live. Anyone who tells you it is obviously settled is selling something. What I would take from this is narrower and more useful. When it produces something excellent, no comprehension was involved, so do not raise your trust across the board. When it produces something stupid, no comprehension was involved there either, so it is not a lapse and there is nobody home to have had one. It is one process. You are seeing both ends of the same machine. Everyone gave you the headline. Here's the long version.